Class, there wasn't just one, but there were two major Yu-Gi-Oh events that happened this weekend, and the crazy thing about it is that it went largely undocumented. In case you guys didn't know who I am, hi, I'm TheCaliEffect, and I'm your professor for today's video. And today, we're going to be breaking down the huge problem that Konami has, but also keeping you up to date on the updated version of the Yu-Gi-Oh meta. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Now class, normally it is Update Monday, a particular time where we talk about something to better you as a person, but because of this particular lesson that we're handing out today, we're gonna be moving Update Monday to tomorrow's video on Tuesday. There is so much for us to cover. Of course, from my Slifer Slackers to my Reading Raws, all the way up to my Obliterating Obelisk, we do have a lesson and classwork for today. The biggest thing that happened over this weekend is that there were two huge YCSs, one in Sydney and one in El Salvador, and most players did not know about it. In fact, Konami's marketing for this YCS was so terrible, the only way that you genuinely could have found out was through their Twitter, which they posted once or twice. It's starting to become more painstakingly obvious that Konami just doesn't give a about any territories outside of North America or Europe. Because not only do other countries get shafted when it comes to promotion, they also get next to no coverage. Go ahead and check the Konami blog about anything regarding the event. And of course, there's no live stream. It almost seems like Konami is just straight up scamming. They are dumping money into places for a tax break or something. Because the level of attention to no detail here is almost ridiculous. But this is where you guys can come in. I want you guys to post down in the comment section for your classwork to let us know how could Konami fix this situation. Of course, the most cost-effective solution is the winner, and I might just give out some Raven Wing sleeves. You just gotta be a part of the Discord. Big dog, you can consider that as a little bit of a thank you and some extra credit. But to give you a little bit of a synopsis before we move on, is that this isn't something that is new. This is something that Konami has always done. We know in countries like Canada, Konami actually can't broadcast because then they would have to give a portion of their overall revenue. But one thing that a birdie did tell me is that we also know that Konami doesn't want to do blog coverage simply because they don't want to pay for it, which I find incredibly weird. Their current blog coverage is just them updating standings and telling you who made the top cut bracket. Unlike other card games, they don't even give out deck lists or any types of decks that have topped the event. It's ridiculously dumb the way that Konami has made their infrastructure. Yu-Gi-Oh is arguably the #1, if not the #2 card game in the entire world. But when it comes to coverage, marketing, merchandising, pricing, it is the worst card game of all time. I simply don't know how worse it can get, especially when you have accomplished players like Team Samurai talking about how they flew all the way across the world, made top 8 at a premier YCS, and for the pricing, they get a single booster box, a pack of sleeves, a playmat. Literally, they didn't even get a booster box. They got a sleeves and a rubber band. Disrespectful, brother. They can't even afford to give them the box. Hey, we may have scaled these packs, but here you go, dog. 24 of them. Thanks for spending over $1,000 to come see us. I also want you guys to let me know how many of you actually knew there was a YCS, and what would you do to be able to fix all of those problems. Moving on to the meta update. There are actually some new Yu-Gi-Oh cards that players are using that I think is really, really cool. When we saw YCS Birmingham, a card that did come up just once was Chaos Hunter. I originally thought that this card wasn't really strong because it's really easy to interact with. I want you guys to think. Artifact Delancey is almost impossible to interact with once it resolves. It can completely put a deck like Malice into its tracks and is a big reason why people were playing Solemn Strike to be able to stop cards like that. Chaos Hunter is a little bit easier to deal with. It's a 2500 attack monster that has to discard a card from your hand to summon itself, and saying that it's a monster that in order for its effect to stay, it has to stay, it gives you more chances to interact. In your professor's brain, he thought that that would be a big reason why players will not play this card. Boy, was I wrong. Tons of Yu-Gi-Oh players have been playing 3 copies of Artifact Lancia alongside of 3 copies of Chaos Hunter, alongside of 3 copies of the new Charmy card. This is some ridiculous hate, but it's an effective strategy to be able to stop Malice. And is also one of the biggest reasons why I think that Malice can never be a tier 0 deck. There's just way too many good cards that are effective against them that also are pretty effective against some of the other cards in the game. And speaking of Solemn, another card that was really good alongside of Solemn Strike has been Solemn Judgment. In today's Yu-Gi-Oh format, there have been a ton of blowout Yu-Gi-Oh cards, spells and trap cards that can be incredibly powerful, as well as tide turning. Solemn Judgment can not only stop a clutch monster summon, if it was a monster summoned from the extra deck, that monster was not properly summoned, meaning that they can't use Monster Reborn on it or something. Of course, nobody's playing Monster Reborn that I've seen, but it's just giving you an example. Lightning Storm alongside of Harpy's Feather Duster are also cards that are becoming really strong. Not only is it pretty decent against Yugioh, getting rid of the field spell and cards like Yugioh plugin, it's also pretty good against a lot of other matchups. A good amount of Yu-Gi-Oh strategies are playing Exceed Encore and Metal Rawness, which are quick play spell cards. Being able to get rid of your opponent's spells and trap cards is a little bit more important in today's Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Now, the last popular Yu-Gi-Oh card that I seen was the Black Goat Laughs. This card has been an absolute menace, using its effect to be able to not only stop Blue Eye's ultimate Spirit Dragon when it's summoned, and also being able to stop Yugioh Detonator. I think that this card is perfect alongside of other cards like Metal Rawness and Exceed Encore, as well as other powerful board breaker cards like Ultimate Slayer 2. Now, big dogs, of course, due to a litany of problems that Konami has to offer for us, low attendance, bad scheduling, bad promotion, and everything else, we can't necessarily talk about the YCS as how we want to. But there were actually a lot of events going on that weekend. I'm going to be showing you some topping deck lists that happened over the course of the weekend, and I'm going to let you guys draw some opinions from it, as well as show how these cards and how the meta has been shaping up. To jump on into YCS Salvador, I thought it was really cool that Pure Yugioh as well as 2 Mermail builds got first place, and I would have loved to go over those particular deck lists. Personally, I think that Pure Yugioh is making some huge headway when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh competitive space. It's actually an amazing going second deck. It's pretty good against Malice because you're not playing cards that feed into your opponent's bestial monsters, as well as it gives you a lot of room for tech options inside of the deck. And while we're not able to look at the Mermail deck, fortunately enough, we're able to look at the first place winner of YCS Sydney and his Pure Yugioh deck. What I find really interesting about Pure Yugioh's is that when it was introduced in Europe, Americans pretty much made fun of this. A lot of cocky American players said that this was the cheap way to play the deck, and it wasn't as effective as Mitsurugi or Fiendsmith. But here we go, another week with Pure Yugioh actually doing something huge. Winning YCS Sydney Australia is pretty big. Like I said before, you're less susceptible to cards like the bestial monsters, and you also have enough room to be able to play some solid cards like Metal Rawness inside of your main board to not only counter Blue Eyes, but also the mirror match. And the best thing about it is that the pure version of Yugioh only gets stronger because in Maze of the Masters, we're going to have the 7th Tachyon, giving this deck a little bit more flexibility, and even when the ban list does roll around, we can pretty much guarantee that this will still be a meta contending Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Another thing that we can see that we talked about popular cards was the Solemn Judgments and the Lightning Storm alongside of the Harpy's Feather Duster. This deck is just so well balanced, and there's even a going second version of this deck that can break boards fairly easy and take advantage of some of the most powerful Exceed monsters in the game. Shout out to Frederick Kamal and his YCS win. It would have been really cool to see the top cut play inside of the YCS because Blue Eyes did also top. That's right, big dog. Kunlun Lei and his Blue Eyes deck is pretty much the standard of what we're probably going to see for the strategy. When I made my Blue Eyes deck profile, it was pretty close to standard. There's enough room to be able to play a ton of hand traps, the Mole Charmies, Ash, Effect Veiler, and of course, Dominus Purge alongside of Infinite Impermanence. But a really big banger card that I did not play that I think we should strongly consider is Majesty of the Dragon of White. Showing up to 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons in your hand, Monster Zone on your graveyard, then being able to destroy cards on your field could be huge, especially seeing that it's another card that you can search with your wishes for the Eyes of Blue. Also, as you can see, players are very prepared for Malice in the side deck, between Lancia and Chaos Hunter, and even Ultimate Slayer, which can do some damage not only against Yugioh because we play the Exceed monsters, but also can get rid of some Malice cards by sending some Link monsters to the graveyard. It seems that there's only going to be 2 copies of Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon, 1 Ultimate and 1 Moonlight, and then of course the Light Storm Dragon for a Blue Eyes build. It's really a surprise to no one that Blue Eyes is a top competing Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's been doing fairly successful since its release. But a deck that I want to highlight is a strategy that hasn't been successful. In YCS Birmingham, we've seen Fire King take first place, and while I think that Fire King was closer to the meta than was not, Mika Caitlin in his Phantom Knight decks actually proved a lot of players, including myself, wrong. At first sight, it seems like Mika's deck's everywhere. He has the engines, the bestials, the fiendsmith, even the Horus cards inside of his deck. He's true to the Phantom Knights as he does play enough names, and a card that I really want to highlight is that Black Goat Laughs. The Black Goat Laughs isn't the sole reason why he won, I bet, but it's probably a really good card to play inside of this deck because you do play a ton of cards that discard from the hand to the graveyard. I think for the players that are looking for a way to play Phantom Knights in 2025, this is not only the best list that we've seen in quite some time, this could be a standard that Phantom Knight players can follow to be successful inside of this format. I'm not sure if it'll have sustained success over a long course of time, but it's really fun and exciting to find out that other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, not the best decks in the game, can compete. Now, there's a couple of more deck lists that I want to talk about that happened in Sydney because there were some exciting Yu-Gi-Oh decks that can compete. I normally don't go over this many decks, but if it's something that you guys want to see, please let me know down below in the comment section and we'll make these a little bit more frequently to give you guys some really cool lists. But another player that I want to highlight is Samuel Kwan in his White Forest deck. This deck is slightly different than what I would normally see in other White Forest decks. A lot of times we see White Forest as an engine or maybe other engines like Fiendsmith inside of White Forest, but this one's a little bit more pure. In actuality, Azamina is part of White Forest in the lore, so technically it is a pure White Forest deck. What I like about this strategy is that it did play those board breakers like the Black Goat Laughs inside of the deck, but it also played hand traps, something that you normally don't see inside of the strategy. It was pretty versatile, and it can summon Chaos Angel multiple times because sometimes one is not enough. There's then Yasin racking up another top, guys. If you guys don't know who Yasin is, shout out to my boy. He has a YouTube channel, and this time around, he's going to be playing the deck that he said is one of the best decks in the game, Crystron's. This deck is decently budget. I actually built the entire deck, main extra inside, for under $75. And while this deck does play some expensive cards like the Molcharmies, you don't necessarily need them to be able to play. I think that this is simply one of the premier budget Yu-Gi-Oh lists that you can be playing for this format. So strongly consider Crystron's if you were looking for a cheap competitive Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Now, I told you I wasn't just going to highlight any YCS in particular. I think we can learn a lot just by looking at Yu-Gi-Oh strategies from other events. There was a German Open that also happened this weekend, and Memento took the whole thing. That's right, big dog. You guys are looking at the meme team. And as you can see, Chaos Hunter, Artifact Lancia inside of the deck. It's been a common theme to play these cards as well as Metal Ronus inside of your deck. So if you guys are looking for what the best players are playing for their tech options, those are the cards like I said before. I think that it's a little bit risky to play Meows in the main deck. Kind of crazy, but go ahead, King. But this is also one of those decks that can not only break boards with Ultimate Slayer because it does have the space, it can also summon a Bayo Akua Lightless Shadow and Artifact Dagda you. So technically, this deck has multiple ways to be able to prevent the opponent from banishing cards for the entire turn. Now, Malice hasn't fallen completely off the map, and Danielo Siracuso is playing a standard list as it seems. I still think one of the most ridiculous things about this deck is the Nightmare Griffin lock in the main monster zone. Really interesting that he's playing Nightmare Cerberus as opposed to Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax, but it's pretty good at being able to clear monsters inside of the main monster zone. We're moving back to Shifter in the side deck, especially if players are going to be playing more pure Ryzeal, and we are playing those board breakers like Metal Ronus and Ultimate Slayer inside of the main. Big dogs, my overall evaluation on Yu-Gi-Oh is close to the same. While the game does has its problems, there are Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that aren't the best decks in the game that can compete, and I absolutely love it as the Rogue King. There are some cards and situations that feel ridiculously unfair, but overall, if Konami fixes their marketing issue, maybe there will be some things that are more exciting to look forward in Yu-Gi-Oh! After all, I got all this information from a third-party website, and then I had to find out that the events happened through other content creators. It's really ridiculous that Konami does a terrible job at supporting its game until it doesn't. But overall, like I said, let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What would be your game plan for Konami to fix this particular situation? And what do you think about the meta? Also, of course, if you want to see more videos like this, it's 100% something I can do. But until then, be sure to check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.